Okay, so welcome everybody. We're looking at the Tur Shin Yud Daled, and let's read a little bit. Ein binyan v'stira b'kelim. Right, the term binyan v'stira doesn't apply to kelim, or at least in some way. You're not violating the law of binyan by a kli. We'll see that doesn't really mean what it sounds like. Bahani mili she'eno binyan mamash. What that means is that they're not. I'm going to translate it a little bit differently. That binyan in a kli and binyan in a house or on the ground are not equivalent. It's not binyan mamash. It's not the same thing. For example, chavit shenishbara v'dibek shivereha b'zefet. For example, a barrel that was broken and it was put together with zefet, with tar. Yachol lishavra lekachat ma shebetocha. You can break it, take what's in it. Ubilvat shelo yikaven lenokva nekev yafeh. As long as you're not trying to make a nice, neat opening. Sheyeh la petach. De'im can have a mitakin mana, because if so, you are called mitakin mana. You're called creating something or fixing something, because you're fixing this new hole. Avalim hi shlema. But if it's a barrel that's never been broken, asur afilu lishavra, you can't break it. Vafilu nekev ba'alma, even if you're just doing a regular hole. Asur and even if you just want to make a hole in it, you can't do that. Asur lin kov ba mechadash. Can't make a new one. Of course, we'll use an old one. You could reopen. And if it had a nekev and you were trying to get the nekev to be wider, you can't do that either. So he did a weird thing, right? He already kind of brought in the Tosfot, right? He's just already telling us that he's like the Tosfot. Everyone sees why. Why do I say that?
Sounds like, what's it called again? The
Mustiki.
Mustiki, yeah.
Exactly. So let's look at the Bet Yosef. He's going to actually bring three opinions. It's helpful to notice that it's helpful to notice how many they are. Then you see that there are in fact three opinions. In other words, you see that they're different. That he's saying what he's actually. You don't really. I find that if you number it, then you sort of see, okay, this is what he's doing. Then I understand it better. Anyway, so look at the Bet Yosef. Ein binyan v'stira b'kelim haki amrina b'per kol kelim u'b'per kol marvin. That's what we saw in the Gemara. Umasha katuv ahani mili she'eno binyan mamash per kol marvin. That's one of the Gemaras that we saw. Tanan natnu migdal. This is an eruvin. V'na'al b'fanav v'avad hamafteach harei eruv. It's still an eruv even though it's locked up. Uba it says v'amai. Hu b'makom echad ve'eruv b'makom acher. Who? And then it goes on. V'rav v'shmuel damri travaihu. And here's hacha. Now here I have a correction in the nusach. He's going to quote the nusach of the Gemara a little different from ours. The nusach that we have is, I'll read it the way our nusach is, a little easier to understand. Hacha be migdal shel leveni askina. Here he has different words. He has the binyan shel migdal, but it really should be migdal, but migdal shel leveni. That's what the Gemara says. At least our Gemara. In other words, it's a brick migdal, and therefore he can't break it, or therefore he can break it, or we thought therefore he can break it maybe. But katav al zeh harosh. So we didn't see the rosh, but the rosh is going to come out exactly like the Tosfot. V'zehu lishono, and this is what he says: Mashma desalka daite meikara da'iri b'migdal shel eitz. It's obvious. It seems that the Gemara was thinking it was migdal shel eitz. Shuhu kli b'tema my kashele have b'makom. Why did the Gemara ask? He's in one place and and Erev is in another. V'halo mutar l'shaver kli b'Shabbat le'echol ma shebetocho k'detana b'perek chavit shover adam et chavit le'echol mimenu grogrot. We saw that you could break a barrel to get the grogrot. So why is there a problem? Let him get his eruv. V'yesh lo yimar de b'perek hamevi kadeyayin, that we can learn from that over there in Beitza, mukila b'mustiki, and there's our word. It's a mustiki. Uperish Rashi shivrei kelim umudabakim yachad al yedei zefet, and that's what Rashi says. They're pieces glued together. De machmat griuto lo chayshinan shema yitkaven lasot kli. Because of its bad nature, it's being an inferior quality, you're not worried that you're going to come and make it. But in our Gemara, where it said you seem to apply you couldn't break it, it's because it was not mustiki. So we saw this in the Tosfot. Even though there it says only according to Rabbi Eliezer, mihu gam l'Rabbanan ika l'ukmei hachi. But we could say that it's a mustiki according to everybody. Lo pligi ale de Rabbi Eliezer ela mishum de'ihu sfir levachula. So he's not going into detail, but the point is, the Tosfos explained to us that really the machloket is by everybody. Hilchach, but tikun kli de shayich beibinyan. So if it's a real kli, shayich beibinyan modu rabbanan the asur l'shaver chavit. The rabbis would agree that there is a binyan bekelim, and it's asur to break a barrel. And the Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan would agree that to eat the grogrot. You can't break it to get the grogrot. Just because it was mustiki, we were allowed to do it. The binyan gamur, v'stira gamur, because when it's proper breaking or proper building, which means that it's a fully fledged item and you're breaking it, shaykha shapir kelim, that exists. That is an isser by kelim. Kida amrina and bereish haboine manda ayel shufta, and we bring a proof because we have this case of a manda ayel shufta be kupina de mara de chayiv mishum boine. Because if you put a shovel together, you're chayiv and boine, and a shovel is certainly a kli. Nothing more kli-like than a shovel. So you see that there is binyan bekelim. V'lo k'moshe perish Rashi b'per klal gadol. Not like Rashi gabe manda avid chavita v'tanora v'chalta de mishum bone lo mechayev the ein binyan bekelim, and not like Rashi who says here, we didn't see this, but this is a Rashi where he says there's a case where you're chayev, and he says you're chayev because of makbeh patish, and you're not chayev because of binyan. And this is actually the source for saying that Rashi holds that by kelim the problem is only makbeh patish and not binyan. Even though we saw some Rashis that seem to imply, or at least I don't know, it maybe imply that Rashi was holding that there actually is binyan bekelim or whatever. But here he's saying that there is no binyan bekelim, and the only reason you're chayiv is because of makbeh patish.
Rav Landis. I think Rav Landis was saying something too, Chris. So. But Rav Landis on mute.
We don't hear you.
Now, yeah. Let me just ask very cautious. It's like maybe just a close kasha. How do you have makbeh patish when there's no binyan?
Well, makbeh patish, you're saying you're building something. You're making a kli though. You're not making a building is by buildings, and by kelim, if you finish the kli, then it's makbeh patish. If you put a hole in it to do the final adjustment, then that's makbeh patish would always be with kelim, I guess. I don't know. To think about that. You're saying no, there's a separate chiyuv. Is a separate makbeh patish is the 39th malacha, right? It's a separate chiyuv. It's not connected to binyan.
I have a problem getting it. I don't know. Because if it was not some form of active completion of binyan, that's how binyan's assumed. I mean, they need a better, for me, they need a better way of understanding, which I don't have.
Joel, you want to help? You have an idea?
Well, I think this is not the way we end up in the Mechaber, but I think there is a strain of the Gemara that seems to think that, like we have binyan for things that are mechubar lakarka, or things that are very big also, we have Makev Batish is just the parallel malacha that you do for Kalev, right? Binyan is what works for things that are big or stuck in the ground. And if it's a kli, it's Makev Batish. It's not the way we end up.
Except it's problematic because like that means that as long as you don't finish the kli, you didn't do Makev Batish, so you would be well, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be where we end up. Is that unless you finish the
we're not
kli,
going to say that. We're not going to say that.
Yeah,
don't worry. Don't worry. I'm going to show you a little bit of an Aruch HaShulchan, and we're not going to say that. Don't worry. Okay, so that is this is the Rashi, by the way. So he's just saying that Tosfos is not like Rashi. He's saying that Tosfos says there is binyan b'kelim, and the only reason that it was permitted to break the barrel to get the grogros is because it was a broken down barrel. And Rashi says no, there's no binyan b'kelim, no stira b'kelim, but there could be makeh b'patish. By the way, if you hold, what's the nafkamina? If you hold that the only yisur by kelim is makeh b'patish, then what's the nafkamina? So what? You either way, it's usur. Let's say. I mean, we said one thing. Maybe if you don't finish the kli, but give me another nafkamina.
I mean, generally the shear, right? It's not just like finishing, right? That we say that the shear for bona is kol shehu, right? So
also,
like,
makeh b'patish.
right, but depending on whether that's like yes and no, right? Because we have the debate about the chiseling for it and things like that as to whether it is makeh b'patish or bona. So depending on whose opinion you're at, it isn't necessarily. And so the question of just like how much you need to do to be chayav would be distinct.
But give me another difference. Yeah, Max.
How many chatats you bring? If you're chayav only in one or in both.
No, but let's say you're only chayav in makeh b'patish for kelim, and so that's all you are. So you'd only bring one. So there's another nafkamina. Anyone have another idea?
Well,
destroying it without.
No, go for it. No.
Ori was saying something.
So were you?
Well, we saw someone reading based on the Magin Mishnah that Psik Reisha wouldn't apply with Tikkun Kli, which is a Toledav Makeh b'Patish, which wouldn't be true of Bona.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if we made. Yeah, okay. So therefore, what? And if it's bona, then you're saying bona, then we would have Psik Reisha, but by Kli we wouldn't.
Bona or Stira. Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Wait, Ari, what do you got?
I may be wrong here, but what about Stira where we don't make an opening?
Exactly, that's what I was thinking. That's the other.
It's bona.
That's the other thing. If we say it's because of bona, then we have its evil twin brother Stira also. But if we say it's only makeh b'patish, there's no evil twin brother of makeh b'patish. Just if you didn't do makeh, if you broke it, if you destroyed the vessel, then it wouldn't be anything because it's not makeh b'patish to destroy it. But if it could be destroying, it could be destroying completely. Let's say breaking it in a way that is a destructive breaking, but not totally destroying it would be maybe usher because of shvira. Yeah, Lexi, what do you got?
I think that is shot, and I also think that helps explain the Rashi that like the Beit Yosef has a big issue with the Rashi about Makalkel, right? Or I forget if it's the Beit Yosef or he's quoting somebody. But where Rashi says that like it's Makalkel and therefore it's fine, and they're like, what do you mean it's Makalkel and therefore it's like nothing? Like we say Kol Makalkelin Turin, like you're putter if you do malacha like derech kilkul, but you're not. It's not mutar l'chayim.
Right.
And I think the shot is Rashi saying like, yeah, it's not that you're doing a malacha in a non-productive way. It's that you're doing just destruction and just destroying a thing. If we understand things as not being like binyan related, just destroying a thing is actually not a malacha at all.
At all, exactly. I think 100%. That's exactly the chap. That once you say it's only because of makeh b'patish, then destroying will become patur. We get totally mutter. All right, so totally mutter, in fact. All right, let me go on. Let's go on a little bit in the Beis Yosef. I want to I want to devote, I think my plan is to do the first hour just Beit Yosef, and the second hour the everything else. Okay. Vahada amrinan bekol dukta ein binyan bekelim. Also, we have saying it's such a common phrase. So what did Tosfos explain it? Hainu davka ke'ein hasarat menorah shel chuliyot b'perek kira b'perek sheni di yom tov. That's like putting together something made of parts, like a Lego kind of thing. That's not. Aval k'sha'osei kli o tikun gamur. But if you're making an actual vessel, you're making a violin, or fixing something, mikri shapir binyan ad kanashon, and that's the end of the Rosh. And that's how that's the source for the tour. That's actually how the tour is going to paskin, and that's how the Beis Shulchan Aruch is going to paskin. V'ken katav gam came beperech chavit, v'hu midivrei atosfot beperech kol marvin ubeperech chavit ubeperech kol klal gadol. Okay, that's all. Answer 1. Now answer 2. Vaharan. See, if you're making a table, here's your next box in your table. Vaharan beperek chavit tiretz be'inyan acher. He has different teretz. Delo sharinan shavirat chavit ela b'kli katan. It only will allow it if it's a kli katan. Kagon chavit delo shayich be binyan v'stira. But if it would be a big chavit, he's saying is small. I've seen chaviyot that are 3 meters tall, but fine. Wooden chaviyot. But he says it's small. And in other words, it doesn't really matter. He's saying the chavit that we talked about of Grogra was a small chavit. The teres again. The teres where are we? Again, the parachavit. Tiretz be'inyan acher. Delo sharinan shvirat chavit ela b'kli katan kegon chavit shel delo shayach be'inyan v'stira ava b'kli gadol. Lo, if it's a big kli, no. Umishum hachi parchinan be'eruvin anachnu atano. He puts it b'migdal hu atano on the Mishnah b'migdal hu b'makom echad ve'eruv b'makom acher hu mishum de b'migdal gadol askina. The migdal is usually big. The have ohel, and that's called like an ohel v'shayich be'binyan v'stira. Have a migdal katan, but if it would be a very small migdal lo shayich be'binyan v'stira v'shari, then it would be permitted. We can perish Rashi be'erevin. We can muchach sugya dahatam ad kan lashon haran. V'gam tiretz zeh, v'dam terutz zeh his kiru Tosfos. So actually, Tosfos mentioned this in the Tosfos that we saw. But perakol marvi el shenire shelo samchu alav, but they didn't really accept it as a sufficient answer. Mishum hahi demanda ayel shufta bekupina demara, because of the man who built the shovel who was chayev mishum bonet, and that's for sure a small thing. Afagav the klikatanhu. So how's the Ran going to explain? Ran shesamach al terutz ze ikka the terutze. So how can we explain for the Ran the shovel case? The ki amarin anein binyan v'stir v'kelim hanimili bekli shenit parek. Ve'en sarich uman b'chazakato. That's talking about a kli that broke apart, and you don't need a person who's a professional, who's an expert to tighten it. Aval ose kli. In other words, that's where we say it is no building beklim. But by the shovel case, you need to be an expert. Aval ha'ose kli. Mitchilato, inami kli shenit parech v'tzarich oman b'chazarato. So if you make a kli, if you make a violin from the beginning to the end, or it's a kli that fell apart and you need to be a professional to put it together, b'chozik, strongly, kol shech zero lo mikri binyan b'kelim. That's not called binyan b'kelim. There's another term, ela ose kli mikri. It's called making a kli, and making a kli is aser also. So the case of the shovel is also because you're making a kli. I mean, you have to ask yourself, which of the 39 malachos is that? You're going to have to kind of say bona in the end. But I guess what he's saying is that it's a little bit difficult, but I guess what he's saying is that there is bona.
He says explicitly, Mishum Bona.
Yeah.
Mishum bona. So I always stop two words too early. Yeah. So it's Mishum bona. So you got to say it's Mishum bona. There you go. He says it explicitly. Just seeing if you're all awake. So in other words, bona comes back. The ein binyan bekalim is when it's small and you're breaking it. And it's not, or you're putting it together, but it's easy to put together. And actually, if you looked at this, actually, I didn't send it out to you. One of the sources I didn't send out in the Pinine Halacha, he talks about eyeglasses. If the eyeglass lens always comes in and out, pops in and out all the time, then it's mutter to put it back in on Shabbat because it's not bechozek, and it doesn't require you going to the eye optometrist. But let's say to tighten the screws on the glasses would be forbidden, or to rearrange. I don't know if the glasses are need to bend the frame around the lenses would be forbidden, because that's already like professional thing to know how to do that perfectly. So anyway, so bona sort of comes back into the picture when you're building the whole kli. It's called osikli, and that's the shovel case. But if it's not the shovel, if it's just breaking a barrel or breaking something, then if it's small, it's not a problem. V'ken katav huzal. He said this himself. Bereish perek habona, ubereish perek kol akeli. V'ken katvu Rav Magid perek yud. V'af al pi shekatvu atosfot mihu b'Yerushalmi kamar. Oh, we saw this Yerushalmi. That the Yerushalmi said what? The Tosfos brought kamar. How did the tema the migdal shel even avab migdal shel eitz naase kishoiver esachavit leachol mimenu grogros. But you saw there that the Yerushalmi understood the whole Mishnah as being a stone migdal, and that's why your eruv was in one place and you were in another, because it was a stone, you couldn't break it. But if it would have been a migdal of wood, then it would be just like the grogrot case, and you could break it. And therefore, according to the Yerushalmi, even a big or small wooden object you could break. Mashma de below mustiki, and doesn't even have to be mustiki. It could be whole. Nami shari bekli eitz below samach harosh alav. The rosh didn't rely on this. V'Rabbeinu satam k'divarav karosh, and the Tur followed the rosh. Did I skip something? No. Just I'm wondering if to skip here. No, we'll read a little bit more. Ubeperek Havit, Kuf Mem Vav. We learned that last time. Amatnit in the Shover Adam et Havit leechol mimenu grogrot. Perish Rashi mishum de ein mekalkelin mishum de ein mekalkel mishum iser Shabbat. Mishum de ein mekalkel mishum iser Shabbat. He says that you can break the Chavit because Mikalkel is not an Isser for Shabbat. Katav alav Haran, the lo nehira. It doesn't make sense. The nehi, the kol Mikalkel in Peturin. It's true that we say kol Mikalkel in Peturin. And this is what Lexi was talking about. I think this is the thing that Lexi you were mentioning, that this is where he doesn't understand Rashi. But if Rashi holds, this is Rashi. If Rashi holds that it's only because of Makeba Patish, then there would be no such thing as Mekalkel by a Kli at all. It would be mutter. But the Ran doesn't understand like that. Nihi the Kol Mekalkel in Peturin is Surah Miha'ika, but there's still Asr. Ella Hainu Taimat gave on the Ba'alma Mekalkel Patur of Al Asur, Hacha Mishum Tzorech Shabbos Shari Latchila. Oh, he says, because of Sorech Shabbos, we're going to get rid of the Rabbanan of Mekalkelim. So you can't go around and Mekalkel things for fun on Shabbat, but you could do it if it's a Tzorech. Now, if you look in the Bir Halacha, we're not going to look at that, but if you look in the Bir Halacha, he doesn't like this. He says, I never heard of such a thing. I never heard of Tzarech Shabbos as being a reason to allow Issur Rabbanan. Everything is Tzarech. I mean, most Issurim Rabbanan on Shabbos are, on Shabbos. And, and therefore, they're the Tzarech Shabbos, you would want to do them. Anyway, this is what he says. He said in Bir Halach he doesn't specifically mention this Beis Yosef, but he says he never heard of such a thing. Maybe he didn't read this Beis Yosef. Umishum letzarech Shabbos shari lechatchila. Umihu davka bekli katan. Aval, this is davka bekli katan. Aval bekli gadol lo. In other words, bekli gadol, you're not allowed to break it, even for the food. Kevan deshayich be binyan v'stira, because that would be mamish stira. So you can break a small thing.
But gadol is like ohel, right? I mean, in the last page, his example was that the big migdal was already like ohel.
Right.
So it makes sense. Binyan is binyan, like normal binyan, because it's big enough to
right. So breaking would be a stira and binyan in a building, so it'd be asur, right?
So when he says small, just to put in context, we mean smaller than what you'd consider ohel.
Yeah, the ohel, the size that we're talking about is 40 se'ah, and one of the mefarshim says that it's an amma by 3 ammas. 3 ammas, I think? Yeah, by 3 ammas, which is not very much. It's like the volume of a bathtub. It's not that much.
You could get in it, so you could call it an ohel. It's just enough to
Exactly. It's like a single tent. Okay. And now here's the third answer. Remember, I promised you 3 answers. So here's the third answer. V'katu trumat hadeshen. Now, when you read the Beis Yosef, it just seems like he's going on and on and on. What is he doing? So I'm trying to explain. He's giving you 3 different answers. V'katu trumat hadeshen, Siman samach hey, b'shem or zarua, deha deshover et hachavit le'echol mimenu grogrot, ayri b'chavit she'eno machzika arba'im sa. Wait a second. Is that the same as the Ran? The Ran said katan. All right, let's see if it's this. I understood this is a third answer, but anyway, let's continue. Be'eno machzika arba'im, it's very similar. It's small. Ve'have kli ve'en stira b'kelim. Ve'efshar dilaharan nami lo mikri kli gadol ella im kenhu machzik arim says. So maybe this is not a third opinion. Maybe this is just trying to get to the answer to your question of what is big and what is small, and maybe we're using the Or Zarua and the Trumat Hadeshen to help us. Right, let's go. Umasha katav Rabbeinu bu'avad shelo yitkaven lenokva nekev yafer. And what the Tur said, that you shouldn't try to make a nice opening when you break it. Perek chavit b'mishnah shover adam et hachavit le'echol mimena grogrot. That's the source. Ubilvad shelo yitkaven la'asot kli uperish Rashi shelo yitkaven la'asot lo kli lenukva yafe b'peh na'eh. Umasha katav. So you can't make a nice opening. Umasha katav aval im hi shlema asur afilu l'shover. But if it's whole, you can't break it. Klomar ein tzarich lomar she'asur lenokva yafeh b'peh. Not only should you not make a nice opening, peh na'eh, with a nice opening, demiktaken mana, because that would be mitaken mana, ela afilu l'shovra b'inyan she'eno osei kli asur. But even to break it in a way that it wouldn't make a kli is asur. For time mishum dekol shahakli shalem she'eno mudbak mustiki shayich be binyan v'stira kamoshin payer. So as long as it's a kli that is whole and not glued together, there is a problem of breaking it. And therefore, wait, so what does it do with the opening? What'd you say?
That's our nafkamina from before when we were between Tosfos and Rashi.
Right, Rashi would totally permit it.
No binyan.
And the Ran, it's an nafkamina between the Ran also and the Rosh, right? It's an nafkamina between the Ran and the Rosh. The Ran would allow that. because it's small.
If it's
I
small.
take it back. I guess it's really not a third answer. I guess I thought that was three answers, but it's two answers. It's really the Ran and the Rosh. And the third answer, the Shumas Adeshin, and the Arzura is just really an explanation. Okay.
Wait, Rav Nachum, could you
Yeah.
just say what do you think the answers are? Question. What's the question?
Oh, the question. The question. For that, you need a larger computer. If you get the reference, nobody gets the. Joel gets the reference.
A Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, exactly. No, the question is, what is the question? The question is, why can't we break the migdal? Why is it that we can't break a kli to get what's inside? We thought that was permitted. So we say either because the kli itself is ra'ua, or because the kli is small. Basically, that's the punch. That's the short summary.
But
All
Rav
right.
Nachum, we did have a third answer from the Yerushalmi, which no one seems to hold, but that's also
right.
brought up, right?
Thank you. Right, it's true. We do have the Yerushalmi, which says what?
It's the material. The material makes a difference, right? That Kli, Evan.
Even if it's big, well, if that it's
Yeah.
disconnected to karka, you'll have to say. As long as it's disconnected to karka, it's permitted. And when it's made out of stone, well, it's always going to. I don't think they put stones on like wheels. Probably stone also meant that it's connected to karka.
Oh, I thought they were just saying you couldn't break the stone one, which means that from that Gemara, we're inferring that if it was eights, it was saying you could break it. That's how
if it was
proved
eights, if it was wood, you could break it. Exactly. The Yerushalmi would hold that the only reason you couldn't get to your food inside the migdal was because it was a migdal built. The way I'm going to explain, the way I understand it is a migdal built on the ground, built as a building.
Okay. I thought they were saying it's so hard to break. So remember, it's the case of the Eruv where if the inference is that you can't break it,
I don't think so.
You're saying you're not allowed to break a stone one, but you're allowed to break a wood one.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's the way I understand it. Okay, that was Aleph. Let's go to Bet. Somebody want to read Bet? Or just continue a little bit in the tour. Maybe Aaron?
היה בה נקע ונסתם, אם הוא למטה מן השמרים, אסור לפותחו, כיוון שהוא למטה וכל כובד היין עליו, צריך סתימה מעל יתה, וחשיב כפותח מחדש. למעלה מן השמרים, מותר לפותחו. So if there is a hole that has been stopped up, that is below the I'm forgetting the word in English for the
dregs. Maybe the dregs?
The dregs of the wine. It is forbidden to open it because since it is below the dregs and all the weight of the wine is on top of it, it requires a stima, a good stima, and so it would seem as if he were opening it. If he were to take out the stopper.
Because of the weight of the water, the stima had to be a really good one, and therefore it's like it's not there. It's not a stima. It's actually he rebuilt it's like a refurbished barrel at that point. Hashiv kipotech.
Right, so it'd be like he's making a hole in it.
It's like a new one now.
But if it is above the dregs, then it's okay to open it.
Okay, good. Go on. I'm not going to do the Beit Yosef here.
מותר להתיז ראש המגופה בסייף, דלה לפתח, כיוון שמסיר ראשה, אבל לנוקבה בצידה, אפילו ברומח שעושה נקב גדול, ואינו דומה לפתח, אסור, דוודאי לפתח מכוון, כיוון שאינו מסיר ראשה. So if you have the thing that's, I forget what it's called, that's holding the wine, you cannot cut it You are allowed to cut it off with a sword because you're not.
We saw a picture of it last week. The top of the barrel where it gets narrow.
Because you're not intending to create an opening. You're just cutting off its head. But to drill a hole in its side, even with
in the side of what?
The side of the barrel.
No, in the side of the. We already said that you could put this hole in the side of the barrel. Now we're saying in the side of the magufa.
Oh, sorry, of the magufa. Put a hole in the side, even with this sort of spear that makes a big hole and it's not like you're making an opening. You are forbidden from doing it because you're obviously trying to make a hole. Because you're not taking off you're not like sort of incidentally making a hole by taking off the top. That is with regard to its side, but from above you could poke holes in it because you're not trying to make an opening. Because when you're poking holes in it, you're obviously not in some way making a petach, because people don't usually make a petach on the top because dust and other stuff is going to get in the wine.
Oh, wait. Ain't derech lasot petach.
Right. It's not the typical way of doing this.
Right. We're trying to get into like, what is the behavior? Is this behavior indicative of your intentions? And when you're trying to make an opening, we're going to say it's forbidden. But when you're not trying, it's allowed. But we're not just going to let you decide that. We're going to go by how it seems, what the normal meaning of what your actions are. The normal meaning of putting it in the top is not to make an open, is not to make a good, it's not the normal way to make an opening. You're doing something unusual. Why is it not normal to do an opening on the top?
Dust will fall in.
Because dust will fall in. So if you do it in this unusual way, then it's permitted. Okay. Look at the Beit Yosef. Wait a second. Yeah, the Beit Yosef Mutar Lahatiz Rosh. Which is Vav, kind of.
Should I keep reading?
Yeah.
Prior to בפרק חבית, רבי שמעון בן גמליאל אומר, מביא אדם חבית של יין ומתיז ראשה בסייף. Right, so this is just from a Breta. וכתב רש"י שם, שמרחיב פיה למטה מגופתה, כדקתני מתיז ראשה שפת פיה, דרשה שפת פיה. וכן נראה מדברי הרמב"ם פרק כ"ג, ולפי זה לא הווה לרבנו לכתוב מותר להתיז ראשה מגופה, דמשמע דווקא ראש המגופה, אבל ראש החבית אסור.
In other words, it's problematic that he says you can break off the top of the magufa. It should have said, you're right, he says mutar latiz rosh magufa b'saif.
Right.
What he really means is mutar latiz rosh chavit, where the magufa is. Because it's not the top of the magufa, it's the top of the barrel where the magufa is. Okay, go ahead. Umatzati.
ומצאתי נוסחה שכתוב בה מותר להתיז ראש החבית, ונוסחה מתוקנת היא. אלא שכתב רבנו בסמוך, והני מילה בצידה, והי במגופה דווקא היא, כמו שהתבאר. ואם רבנו אינו מזכיר כאן מגופה, משמע דבגופה של חבית שרי לנקוב למעלה ולטה. So I found this nusach of the Torah where it says chavit instead of magufa, and it looks like it's actually, that is someone actually fixed that nusach, and it's not the original because it doesn't make sense with what comes next, because when he says you can poke a hole in the side, that is really only for a magufa.
Exactly. Okay, go ahead.
לכן נראה לי דשפיר גרסינן ראש המגופה והכי פירושו. מותר להתיז ראש החבית שמגופה בו.
Right, that's what I said. I jumped. Now, that's what it means. You're allowed to cut off the top where the magufa is. I read a little bit more. Katuv.
וכתוב בתשומת הדשן, סימן סמ"ד, בשם אור זרוע, דהני בחבית שאינה מחזקת יותר מ-40 סאה. אבל אם היא גדולה כל כך, נראה מדבריו שאסור משום דהבי כקרקע ושייך בבניין וסתיר. Right, this is just for a chavit that only holds up to 40 seh. But if it's larger than that, based on what the Torah is saying, it seems like that would actually be considered as karka, and it would be binyan and stira, and you can't do any of this stuff.
Exactly. So we're sort of seeing people lining up behind these ideas of the Ran. Now that was kind of like the Ran, but of the Ran and let's say the Tosfot in general, who are saying there is, there is binyan b'kelim, but if the kelim is very big, therefore it'd be aser. All right, let's go on to Zion.
True to say there is binyan b'kelim, but it's different. Binyan b'kelim is different than regular binyan.
Why is it different? In what way is it different?
Or maybe I'm thinking just in the opinion of the
I think we're just saying that it becomes binyan once it becomes large enough.
And you wouldn't, and it's not binyan, but then you're saying it's not binyan b'kelim when it's smaller than that? There is, it's just a different kind of binyan. It has different criteria.
No, I see what you're saying. Oh.
We're still in the other case.
Wait, let me rephrase what you're saying. You're actually pointing out this kind of a contradiction here. If we're saying that it's binyan, there is binyan b'kelim, then why are we allowing you to chop off the top of a barrel to get the wine? Because isn't that stira b'kelim? So
I was going to ask it that way before, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and then the Ran says, yeah, but if it's big, then you can't do it. If it's talking about mustaki, if it's talking about a barrel made of parts, then we would understand why you could break off the top. But when it gets certain, and then what? And then what? If it gets a certain size, then all of a sudden it becomes asur again. Or you see what I'm saying? Right, it is kind of weird.
We're somewhere in the middle, but this is a different case. So this is the case. We're assuming this is not a mustaki barrel, correct? This is a normal barrel with the magufa where we're cutting off in that area.
In the Mishnah Brura on the Seif, he seems to assume that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about a mustaki.
Oh, okay.
Right. Let's say we're talking. So when it gets certainly big, when it gets a certain size big, then all of a sudden it becomes asur again. That's kind of what he's saying.
Even a giant mustaki would be asur, you're saying, because now it's binyan like
You know what? I think now is a good time to look at the Aruch HaShulchan that I sent. So let's look at the Aruch HaShulchan. I sent it to you if you don't have a physical one. If you have a physical one, it's always better. Tell me if you got it. Thumbs up. Jessica, you got it? Yeah, okay. Now, here, so we're getting to these questions. What exactly is going on here? And I think the Aruch HaShulchan sort of puts he gives an interesting approach. Let's see, I'll read here. Zeh she'amru v'gemara. Everyone's with me? Yeah. Zeh she'amru v'gemara. Ein binyan b'kelim, ein stira b'kelim, ein hakavana k'pshuto. Don't understand it the way it sounds. De'im ken ein isser min haTorah la'asot kli b'Shabbos. That would mean that you could make a violin on Shabbos, and nobody says that. Ela lo amru zeh ela le'inyan ha'chumrot she'chmiru chachamim b'inyan zeh. They only said it regarding chumrot that the rabbis instituted le'inyan zeh. What is be'inyan zeh? Be'inyan zeh means bebone. There are chumrot in bone that apply to bone, regular bone, but don't apply to kelim bone. This is like totally different way of thinking about it. I think he's saying, right? He's saying there is binyan b'kelim. It's just that there's no rabbinic binyan b'kelim. Either you're doing binyan b'kelim and it's asur d'oraita, or it's mutter. They weren't goes there in the same way. Let's see. Let's continue on. You'll see that what I'm saying comes to light in the words. Where are we? Kamo b'sham. I think it's b'sham. Kamo b'sham de mayri the inyan netila v'chazarat latot. like we talked about taking away and putting back doors. That if it's in a house, you couldn't take, I don't remember exactly, it was you couldn't take and you couldn't put back. But if it was in a kli, you could take, but you couldn't put it back. I think something like that. Or, I don't remember exactly. But there was a difference. V'ken be'eruvin. Amru zeh le'inyan ha'mishnah d'nei avad ha'mafteach shel ha'migdal. Back to our migdal again. Sha'eruv b'sham, that the eruv is there. Should be called to l'shovro. He could break it. V'likach ha'eruv k'ditran shover adam et ha'chavit le'echol min ha'gogrot. U'mipnei shehu der kilkul, you could do it. V'od yitpa'er b'zeh. And I'll explain this more. V'ken b'perek kama debeitza amru zeh le'inyan siluk hatrisim. V'ken l'kaman sham le'inyan zekifat menorah, putting the menorah together that's made of parts. Ayin sham. Dekol elu advarim ein behem iser binyan klal min haTorah. These are all things that are permitted according to the Torah. Ela midrabanan hu da'aser mishum geder binyan v'stira, because we made a geder, we made a gezerah on binyan v'stira. What's the gezerah? Like that maybe you'll tighten it. B'zeh amru ein binyan. Now we made a gezerah. You can't put back the door because shema you'll tighten it. And on that we said ein binyan ve'ein stira b'kelim v'yoter mizeh lo nimsa ma'amar zeh. And this statement doesn't mean anything more than that. Notice what the statement means is that if you put back a door, we're not worried that you'll tighten it if it's in a kli. If it's a door of your window of your house, we're worried you're going to tighten it, and therefore we forbid it. Maybe d'Rabbanan. V'ken mivuar medivrei Rambam beperek Yud dechashiv ha'avot melacha v'chashiv sham binyan. He counts binyan. V'lo chilek ben kelim lebinyanim. He didn't differentiate between kelim and binyanim. Adarabba katav sham b'din yud gimel v'ken ha'oisei kli. He says specifically if you, and so too if you make a kli, he's counting in binyan. Harei zeh told of boneh v'chayav. It's a told of boneh and you're chayav. V'ken megabe netegavin. And then if you make a hard cheese, v'amachnis yad b'kardom, and you put a handle in an axe. V'ken etokea eitz be'eitz, and you put two pieces of wood together. Harei zeh told of boneh v'chayav midoraita. Right? Ad kanashona v'harei shechayav al kelim kemo al binyan v'af be megaven gvina ledato chayav chatat. And even by cheese you're chayav chatat. Heichan eskir zeh beperek kaf bet. This is like what Joel was talking about in his class in Mishnah Berurah. What we mentioned in kaf bet, the min perek kaf aleph lahalan mayri b'isur d'Rabbanan, and everything that is in the Rambam after chapter 21 is d'Rabbanan, and he mentioned something in 22, therefore it's d'Rabbanan, and he says k'moshe etchil sham lomar ne'amar b'Torah tishbot ayin sham. And that's just proof that whatever, he's just proving that the differentiation is at chapter 21. The katav sham bedin kaf hey, and in 22:25, hatokea chayav mishum boneh leficha kol hadelatot hamichubarot lekarka lo notlim v'lo machzirin. Therefore, in other words, if you build something, if you're tokea, if you stick something in hard, then you're chayev according to the Torah of boneh, and therefore lefichach the rabbis made a gezerah. Lefichach kol delatot mechubarot lekarka no notlin velo machzirin. You can't put them back at all, even if you put it back lightly, which would be mutter, because shema gezerah shema yitka, because maybe you'll tighten it. Aval delet shel shida v'teva umigdal notlin. Notlin and I think it says, I think the continuation is and machzirin. In other words, by the kli we don't have this gezerah of shema you'll tighten it. By the house we do. Ve'ein machzirin menorah shechol liot mipnei shenira keboneh ve'im echzir patur v'lefi she'ein binyan b'kelim ve'ein stira b'kelim ad kan l'shana. In other words, he's using the Ein Binyan Ve'ein Stira B'Kelim Dafka in the chapters that are talking about the Rabbanan. So you see that's a rabbinic concept. It's a concept to limit the rabbinic gezerah. He's only using this term to exclude things that are near a kabinyan. But regarding actual building, shavedin kli lebinyan b'mechubar b'karka. There's no difference between kelim and there's no difference between kelim and buildings as far as the Yisur D'Oraita. Wait, did you guys hear me, or was I talking away from the microphone? You heard me? No, okay. So what he's doing now, some people would say, well, wait a second, the Rambam is different halachas. He has different opinion. Where Tosfot, maybe Tosfot doesn't hold like Rambam. But he's kind of giving a unified view of the halacha. He says it again in Halacha Dalet. I'm not going to, it just says, just one line. It says, Od kvar nitba'er de bebinyan d'oraita ein chiluk bein binyan lekli. When you're talking about binyan d'oraita, there's no difference between a kli. And if you look at Halacha Hey, he says, Shanu b'mishnah, shover adam et hachavit le'echol mimenu grogrot, va'arambam beperek kaf gimel din bet katav k'lashon ha'mishnah, u'mivuar da'afilu b'chavit shlema yechol la'asot ken, even in a not mustaki barrel you could do that. Mitam dekol stira she'ein amanat livnot leika isura midoraita. There's no prohibition from the Torah to break something if you're not trying to build something afterward. The mekalkelhu v'esidur rabbanan. It's only mekalkel v'esidur rabbanan. But the lo gazru b'kelim, and therefore by kelim there's no gezerah, and you can do it. Now you can't break a house down because you might build a house. So that's like a rabbinic prohibition. You can't, even if you're not planning on building the house again, but you just want to break it down on Shabbos, you can't do it because Shema, you do want to, but in the case, some people do want to break things to build. So even though it would only be D'Rabbanan, so it's only D'Rabbanan if you break a house down, we don't want to kill. But we don't say that by Kelim. The Bekelim, if you wrote that Chol Perot, Pekei Gavna Ein Stira Bekelim, K'moshe Katavti. You hear this? It's a big Kiddush, no? I mean, to me, it was like, oh, it's a very clear way of dividing, because it's.
But this is not like the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch then, in this case. This is Mikkel, relatively. He's reading the Grogro case as what? A normal size chavit.
Right. I mean, on top of this, you can put the right on top. Exactly. This is wait. Is it a different perush?
Well, the Grogro case everybody has to explain, but if you're not explaining it as mustaki and you're not explaining it as
exactly. If you read the whole Shulchan Aruch, the whole Aruch HaShulchan, I should say, until Halacha 8 about, you see from him that he really is uncomfortable with the whole Tosfos thing. He doesn't think that's the right shot, but he even says that he brings all the other poskim that paskin against it, but he says, but what, that's the Halacha, what can I do? But then he says, if you look, I'll tell you, but what he does say, wait a second, where is it?
Towards the end of Chet, I think is what you're looking for.
Yeah, you're probably right. Towards the end of Chet. Oh, yeah. I put it in red. It's hard to. It's bad color. Yeah. Thank you. How'd you know? At the end of Chet, he says, the very end of Chet, he says Omnam, like maybe I don't know, by a couple lines from the bottom. Omnam. By me, it's like in the thing that I sent out, it's like 4 lines from the bottom. Omnam le'inyan la'niut da'ati ein ligaor bahen. Don't criticize people who do what? Who break bottles on Shabbos to get what's in them, even though the bottle is whole. I don't know what I would not want to drink wine that came from a bottle that somebody broke the top off. I would be afraid of getting a piece of glass, but maybe they were confident that the glass went to the bottom of the bottle, and anyway, seems a little bit risky to me. But anyway, but if people want to do that, omnam laniut dati ein ligor behen mipnei sheladat harbe mirabotenu heter gamurhu kamosha katavti. This would be mutter, even though it's a whole item. Umitzati gam shah rashba b'Shabbat sham cholek ala tosfot. He also doesn't like the tosfot. Umasik da afilu chavit shlema mutar lishbor. Even if it's whole, you could break it. Ulefizeh pshita da haose ken yesh lema mi l'smoch. You're certainly relying on the Rashba as like major posek. Al yesh l'smoch al chamisha avot haolam. He's basically saying there's 5 people that are saying this. And I looked in Rav Moshe. I didn't send it out, but if in Rav Moshe, in Orach Chaim Aleph, Rav Moshe talks about in Siman Kuf Kaf Bet, towards the end, he lists all the people that say not like Tosfot. And according to him, the list is Rashi, the Rif, the Rambam, the Ran, the Rashba, the Ritva, the Re'aim, the Tirut, the first explanation of the Tosfot, because he gave the first explanation, and the Gra. All are Matiri. But again, he says, but we have who against them? The Tosfos, the Rosh, the Tur, the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, it's a case where the Shulchan Aruch doesn't follow his own rule. His rule was what? If the Rif and the Rambam agree, then that's the halacha, no? What are the Shlosha Amudei Hora'ah? The 3 pillars of teaching, the Shlosha Amudei Hora'ah. Joel, what do you say?
The Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh.
The Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. So here he goes like the Rosh. Because of Tosfot. Because, I don't know, he goes, because he saw the Or Zarua seems to say that, and I don't know, maybe the Or Zarua, and maybe the Trumat Hadeshet. There's some other people. But the Rav Moshe lists all these people. Rav Moshe in the end says, but again, my hands are tied. It's actually interesting halacha there. This is the tshuva that I didn't send out is from 1936, and he says there that really you could let's say cans. He's talking about cans. Can you open cans? He says you can open cans, except you can't. He comes up with why really you could, because it's like chultot. It's like that basket of reeds, of palm branches. And then he says, but you can't because it's a complicated matter, and the state of Judaism today is such, it's actually very interesting. Rabbi Landis would like this because it's dealing with the society. He's saying in 1936 in Russia, where he was, right, I think it was before he came to America, the state of Judaism was such that if we allow, this is what he's saying, if we allow this, the state of Judaism is so weak that people will they'll do things they'll break things that they shouldn't be breaking, and they'll allow things that they shouldn't be allowing. So he comes up that he wants to hold the line here and say, no, we can't open cans, we can't open bottles, can't open anything. And you say, well, what did he say later? The only other tshuva that I found, maybe there's one more, but that I looked at least, was from 1970. It doesn't have a date actually, but it's from the 70s because it's in volume 4. And there he talks about milk cans, in a milk carton. In America, a milk carton, you open up the flap and then you squeeze it and then you create a spout to pour it out. I don't know if do they still have that, Jessica?
Well, I was just going to say in that Igrat Moshe, not the milk carton one, the cans one, isn't the key point about whether the cans will be reused. So he's saying that it's fine to open cans so long as they're not going to be reused. But that's what might be confusing, because the distinction between
he
cans
says
that can be reused and cans that can't be reused.
Right, that could I didn't that could be. He does exactly, that's what he says. He says the cans could be, he says though that most, he says even though we throw them all out, even then he's saying there, even then he says, even though in general we throw them out, or most people that's considered the normal thing, and therefore it should be mutter. He mentions this thing about the people maybe not, if you're not throwing it out and you want to use it, then it's asur d'oraita. You're making it kli. But if you don't want it and you just want to throw it out, then it's mutter. And I guess it's like he's making a gezerah. It's like too close of a line. If we let people make cans, he doesn't say that though. He just says the state of Judaism is such that we can't do it. And he says if you're a Talmid Chacham and you really need it because of a wedding or something, and you have to open it, then do it in secret in a broom closet, and you could do it. But don't. It's not a thing that you can really allow. It's just like for an emergency, and only if you're a Talmid Chacham, we'll let you do it because you'll understand that if you're trying to make a kli. But you can't say that nowadays we throw them away, and in his day they didn't. He explicitly says there, and even though everybody throws them away, I'm still saying it's usher. And by the milk cartons, he also says it's usher. So there's no place where. So the milk cartons, he says that's for sure usher. So there's no place where he came later and said, well, nowadays you can do it. But we'll see the Pnei Halacha. Ori.
Interesting is it sounds like the Aruch HaShulchan in that, and you see how for practical halacha how hard this is. It sounds like according to Rav Moshe, it's either doraita or motor completely. Like the meaning in the case where you're opening a can because I'm going to use it, I'm going to pour some water in it, would be a doraita, and then there's like no buffer. Like usually you'd have a derabanan as a buffer, but then in the case where you're not doing it for that reason, it's completely mutter. That's a little bit uncomfortable, and you could understand why he would say to be machmir because
it's exactly feeling that it's exactly like the Aruch HaShulchan says. The Aruch HaShulchan says that there is no gap in kelim. Either it's aser, you're making a kli, it's aser deraita, or it's mutter. They didn't make a gezerah, and Rav Moshe is making a gezerah. He's putting in the gezerah. He's filling in and putting in the gezerah because we really need a gezerah.
Yeah.
All right, we'll stop here. I mean, not stop here. We'll take a break here. Okay, we're back, and we're in. I have a little bit. I would have one more chore to do in the Beit Yosef. Not that it's a chore; it's a pleasure. But everyone, look at where we stopped in the tour. Chotmot. We really have to talk about Chotmot because we didn't talk about it at all. Chotmot shebekelim. Chotmot really means lids. Like Joel, you agree? Lexi, you agree? Yeah. Chotmot is lids. So Chotmot shebekelim could go on shida v'teva. In other words, a lid on a shida or a teva. Umigdal. Shakisui shelahem kashur behen bechevel. And if the lid is tied on by ropes, Yachola hatiro. This is very interesting. You can actually undo the knot. When we talk about knots, you guys should think about this. Here it says you can undo the knot, or you could cut the rope, b'sakin, lahatir. Sorry, latiro is untied, or lahatira kliato, or I think it means like unravel the ropes, like unravel them so that it comes apart. V'katav harav Rabbeinu Peretz of hayetedot shenolot behen, but the pegs that you use to lock it, asur lahasiram dahave kebinyan gamur. That would be like building, even though it's a kli. In other words, I'm imagining that there's like wooden pegs that you hammered in to hold like metal pieces together. And that's how you made the box. You took, 6 boards and you made a box out of it by pegging them together. V'katav Adoni Avi Harosh Zal v'davka ke'ein keshirat chevel v'kiyotze bo aval potchat shel eitz v'shel matechet asur lahav. So that's dafka about ropes. But if the cover is of metal, that's what I understand it. Tell me if I'm right here. If it's metal or wood, then asur lahafkiya v'the then you can't break it. Because if you would like break the wooden lid of a trunk, that would be stira, and there's stira b'kelim. Sefer Mitzvos katav de Shvirat potchat. I think potchat also is a lid. Yeah, people agree with me there. Breaking it. Shel tevot nechlachu bo harav Rabbeinu Rabbi Eliezer Matir v'hari oser umihu al yedei goy yesh lahakel adkan. But if you ask a goy, that might be permitted because anyway, there's a machloket about it, about whether you can break these, let's say, lids for larger vessels. And then he says, Vishabakarka could go on delit shall bore. So now we're talking about the same kind of lid, but it's held together it's in the ground. In a bore, shakashur bo b'chevel, yachol hatiro. You could also untie it. The lav kashira shel kaima, because it's not a long-lasting knot. It was a lock. It was a knot meant to be untied and tied all the time. Sharei omed lahatir aval lo mafkia v'chotech mishum stira. But you can't break the door down because that would be stira. Okay. So back to the Beit Yosef in Zion.
Wait. Do you think that a mafkia v'chotech is about the door or about the rope? Right? He says the chevel you can hatiro, you can untie it, but the difference between a kli, and karka is exactly is the rope.
Exactly, you're right. You can untie it because untying a knot is always untying a knot, and that isser is a different isser from bone, and that we're allowing if it's meant to be untied all the time. But cutting the ropes is equivalent to breaking the door down. Cutting the ropes is breaking the kli. Those ropes is what makes the kli a kli. I mean, we don't have vessels so much that are built with ropes. As far as I've never saw one, but apparently they had them like that. You tie ropes together to keep the parts of it together. So then, if you broke the ropes, it would be like breaking any part of it. Okay.
Well, I was thinking like you get like a box of chocolates with like some rope around that holds the lid on top, right? That's for the kli, right? So for a kli, you could break the rope, right?
Mm-hmm.
You just couldn't break the box potentially, depending on But if it was binyan karka, something that's either bigger or being held or attached to the ground, then you can't even break the rope around to get the lid off. But you can untie it.
I mean, the box of chocolates, you probably could break you're saying according to Tosfos, if it's a whole thing, but again, maybe it's flimsy.
I'm thinking about like a wooden box kind of thing.
Not wooden box, right? Then
like a cardboard box.
You couldn't break it. Yeah, okay. All right, so look at Beit Yosef Zion. We're talking about chotmot, which is lids of vessels. Chotmot shebekelim kagon shida v'teva migdal. V'perek hamevi kadei yayin amar Shmuel chotmot shebekarka. These lids in the ground, matir avalo mafkia velo chotech. You can't unwind or cut. Shebekelim matir mafkia v'chotech. Because in kelim you can untie and unwind and cut. Echad Shabbat ve'echad Yom Tov. Uperish Rashi, chotmot shebekarka kagon delatot pitchei borot, the door of an opening to a pit or a cave, umara segura bekishrei chavalim. You tie the cave door closed with ropes. Umatir et hakesher daha lav kesher shel kaimahu shaharei lahatir tamid hu asui. So that's, again, regarding when we study Kesharim, remember that if it's not Shel Kaima, because it's just like a rope door, like you have like you locked, sometimes they have it in construction sites here in Israel, you have metal, like a metal wire, they wrap around to keep the door closed so that children won't go into the construction site or adults won't go in. But if you are an adult who violates their opinion, who wants to go in, you'll unwind that rope. You'll unwind that wire and go in. Now, I don't know, wires might be different from ropes, but maybe, I don't know, that's another topic. Aval lo mafkia, but you can't, if it's in the ground, anyway, by the way, that's probably also problematic because that's in the ground. Aval lo mafkia, sorry, it wouldn't be, if it would be a rope tied to the door and it would be in the ground, it'd be allowed. Aval lo mafkia, but you can't unwind it. Hachevel has listor avot gedelim, to break like the thickness of the ropes. Velo chotech, and you can't cut it. Tahastirahu, that would be stira, and it's in a building. V'yesh stira b'binyan shel karka, and that's usher. But it's in a kli, it's not. How can we fit the Aruch HaShulchan into that? Because I guess this is also only D'Rabbanan. This is only D'Rabbanan in any case, because you're not trying to build, you're trying to rip it apart. It's only asur d'oraita when you're trying to do, even if it's in the ground, when you're trying to do it for the purpose of then building. And if you're not trying to do it for the purpose of then building, it would be, means you're breaking it, you're cutting the rope. You're not going to cut the rope so you can build it again. You have to the cutting of the rope is certainly damage. So therefore, it's only asur d'Rabbanan. So therefore, by a kli, there's no gezerah. V'shel kli kelim kagon tevot hanulot al yedei kesher kevel matir umafkiya v'chotek. You can do everything. There ain't stira b'kelim because there's no stira b'kelim, and let's learn it the way the Aruch HaShulchan tells us. Ain't stira d'Rabbanan b'kelim. In other words, there's no rabbinic gezerahs on kelim. All right, now chet here in the Beit Yosef is new. It's not in the Tur. Maybe Noam, you want to read it?
Sure. Wait, what are you asking? You're asking me to continue in the Beit Yosef?
Yes.
I didn't
right.
follow.
Just continue where we stopped.
So where exactly did we stop?
Dein stira b'kelim. By me, it has, you see it? By me, it has a chet. It has a chet at the beginning.
I'm on Al HaTorah, so
If you were following along, you're right exactly where we were.
I did, but then I left the second you asked me to read. The Ein Zir Bekli, the Efshar de Leharan? No.
No, Garcina begamar per chavit.
Do you want to go to someone else who has it? Oh, I just actually found it. Garcina Begmar per chavit. Tane Chara Chotalot Shel Temarim v'Shel Grogarot Matir Mafkia v'Chotech Ufirash Rashi Matir. Ima Kisoy Kashor Bechevel Mafkia. Should I keep going?
Well, you're in the middle there. Yeah. Read one more.
Sorry, the punctuation on Al HaTorah is really weird.
Yeah, Soter
Sharsharot Achevel Ad Kan Shono V'Ketav Rambam.
Right. No, so explain.
Our Gerson the Gemara, one teaches these chotalot shel tamarim, the leaves of dates and of figs. You can untie them and you can break them and you can tear them. And Rashi teaches you can untie the knots if the covering is tied with a rope. And he says you can break them, meaning you can destroy the chains of the rope. And the Rambam paskin that way.
Right. So in other words, here we're getting introduced to this idea of chotlot, which is right, chotlot, which is very important. That is the idea of tin cans. That is the heter for tin cans, or for other kinds of cartons. And I'll read on. In other words, they're considered like vessels that. What's special about these vessels? Well, the Kolbo is going to tell us.
V'zileshono hakolbo chotalot shel temarim matir aksharim umafkia kol hachevalim ve'afilu besakin ve'afilu gufan shel chotalot lefi shekol ze kemi sheshover egos o shekadim bishvil ha'ochel shebahem ad kan leshono. So the Kolbo permits untying and breaking, and even with a knife, and even the leafy exterior itself, because this is just like someone who breaks the outer shell of a nut or of a peanut or an almond,
right,
in order to get the nut that's inside.
In other words, these are just wrappers. Nobody saves them. Nobody wants them. There's no fear that you're going to use them again, and therefore you're allowed to break them, even according to Tosfot, really. Okay, that's the chotlot. Now, where are we as far as time? What are we going to do about the Shulchan Aruch? basically the Shulchan Aruch is more or less the same as what we've seen. So I think we can go. I mean, there were a little bit of Maggid Avrams that were not. Well, there wasn't so much that was interesting. Let's go straight to the thing I sent you with the time we have left. So that is the Har Tzvi, for example. Now, the Har Tzvi is was very important posek. I guess before, I don't know when he died exactly, but before the 1950s, until the 1950s, I would say. Yeah, Rabbi Landis, that's your cue. But you got
1961.
1961. There you go. Right. So he was at the same time as the Chazon Ish, kind of, and they both actually are very strict about this particular subject. So who would like to read the Har Tzvi for us? The truth is that what we really want is the second part, Gimel, but I brought Bet just because it's also kind of interesting. Lexi, you want to read it?
Sorry, I did check something. Which bit are we looking at?
Bet and Gimel.
Bet and Gimel in the Aruch Shulchan?
No, the Har Tzvi.
Har Tzvi. Okay. One sec. Okay. Har Tzvi. Bet. Od shona malachet makeh b'patish mish'ar malachot. Lav dafka makeh b'patish, ela b'tikun kli shehu me'en makeh b'patish, right? So he's like, this isn't a super dafka term. It is just in general the idea of like finishing, making something into a useful kli. L'inyan eno mekaven kshu psikor.
That's very interesting. Tikun kli, he says, is me'ein makeh b'patish. I don't know what he means exactly. It's not. Why does he say it is makeh b'patish? He says me'ein makeh b'patish.
It's maybe a toledah, right?
Like, I think he's saying that anything where the Isser is Tikkun Kli, which is, yeah, and we could like pick that apart. Either he's saying it like maybe is not actually Mamish Makeh Patish, but is considered like sort of a lesser Isser, but falls under that same general category, or that like actually, no, he's saying anything where it's Tikkun Kli is Doraita Makeh Patish, even though it is not literally quote unquote Makeh Patish.
No, there's because you're not maybe finishing it. You're just you're adding another piece to the violin, but you didn't finish it. So maybe it's not makeh, but it's still going to be makeh b'patish. I mean, right. Is that what he's saying? You think that's what he's saying? Maybe. Okay.
I think he's just trying to like expand, like not being super dafka with the notion.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's saying he's trying to be blurry a little bit. Okay.
So he says that this malacha is different. For the matter of like when someone isn't intending to do it, and it's psik reisha, so it's an unavoidable outcome. V'navikan divrei hamagid mishnah hilchot Shabbat al divrei harambam. So this is the Magid Mishnah on the Rambam Aval ha-mechabek chalim shamatechet patur v'mitkaven tzaref chayav. Right, so the Rambam said if you put out metal coals, you are patur if you just like stam put them out because it's not considered to have a constructive purpose seemingly. But if you are trying, because it's not considered to be kivui, right? Because kivui, the constructive purpose is like making a wick, right? But if you're trying to basically like strengthen the metal, right, and improve the quality of the metal, then you're chayav. I think the Rambam thinks that tziruf comes under bishul, I think is how he ends up categorizing that. But I think presumably here the Magid Mishnah is maybe talking about it differently. כתב שם מגיד משנה וזה לשונו, מדברי רבנו שכתב שהכל תלוי בכוונתו, נראה שכל שאינו מתכוון, אין ראוי לומר בפסיק רישא ולא ימות. והוא לך, אין לומר פסיק רישא ולא ימותו, או לחייב מפני שכשהוא מתכוון הוא עושה מלאכה, וכשאינו מתכוון אין בו מלאכה כלל, שהרי אינו רוצה לעשות ממנו כלי. דומה לכתימת קיסם שהזכרנו פרק א', שכל שאינו קודמו לחצוץ בו שיניו, אף על פי שראוי לכך בכתימתו, פטור, שכל שהוא מפני תיקון כלי, מי שאינו מתקנו, פטור. ואפילו לרבי יהודה המחייב בדבר שאינו מתכוון, וקרובים לזה דברי הרמב"ן, והדבר מוכרח לומר כן, לפי שיטת רבנו, והוא דבריו מגן אברהם, etc. Okay, so he is basically seizing on this bit in the Rambam, which is really fascinating, right? Where the Rambam says that like the chiyuv in this case of putting out the metal holes is entirely dependent on what you're intending to do, right? Not whether you're intending to do kivui, but what your intended goal is, right? And he says that if your intended goal is just to put them out, you're patur. But if your intended goal is to do this sort of tziruf, which he's clearly understanding as tikkun kli, the hartzvi, then you're chayav. And so he's using this as proof that unlike in most other scenarios where we say, like, your kavana doesn't necessarily determine the nature of the malacha, right? It can determine your chiyuv if you say, you know, if we hold like Rabbi Shimon and you're eno mitkaven and it's not a guarantee.
Give an example. Give an example of psik reisha where we wouldn't care that you're eno mitkaven, we'd still make you mechayev. Well,
I mean, I'm trying to think of one that maps really neatly onto this, right? But we have, like, the whole notion is that you're eno mitkaven, you're chayev, right? A classic psik reisha is like you close. There's a deer in your house and you close the door because you want to close your house. Fine, you only wanted to close your house. But in doing that, you are guaranteed to be also trapping the deer. And we just don't care that you're not trying to trap
right, you're chayev. You're chayev.
You've done tzad because you've trapped the deer effectively.
And even though you are zeno mitkaven, because the act is itself an act of tzayid, doesn't matter that you're not mikaven. And yet we say here that by the coals, if you're not trying to make, even though you are straightening the metal, but you're not trying to, you're patur. Why aren't you chayav?
That he's not saying that there's a difference.
So he says that there's no concept of psik reisha.
It's just about like, because this I think is a really fascinating insight into the fact that like a kli is not a totally objective term that exists out in the world, right? Kalim are subjective and are based on
What's his proof? What's his proof? Which is his Gemara that he brings?
It's the one about if you break off like a piece of wood, that if you're doing it, what was the thing? If you're using it to smell, I think the idea was fine, but if you're using it trying to be a toothpick, then it's a problem. But
right,
they say
it's the same act.
It's the same act. And it's all just about whether you are now relating to this as a kli.
So read the next part.
הנה יוצא מדברי המגיד משנה דבר חדש שלעניין תיקון כלי לא שייך פסיק רישא וכשאינו מכוון אין בו מלאכה כלל.
And there's no relevance of psik reisha when you're talking about a kli. You can't say, but you made a kli. You didn't think you were making a kli. So when I tried to open a can, I wasn't trying to make a can, but you did. Psik reisha. He says, no, not relevant.
He says, no, if you aren't trying to make a can, like a kli, you haven't made a kli, right? That like, if that's actually not the thing you're trying to do, and that's not how you're relating to this object, then you simply haven't done that labor.
Right.
התוספות כתובות לא משמע כן שכתבו שם בסופו שהוא מתכוון לבטלו ואין מתכוון לעשות כלי ושייך בפסיק רישא. This is a fun one that we just did in the Classic Talmud program. So this is a bit in Ketubot where they're talking about the Musuchrata de Nizaita, which most people explain as being some like cloths that were used to stop up a barrel, and that the issue with sticking them in there is schlita, but Rabbeinu Tam has a whole big thing about how actually it wouldn't be schlita there. And so the Aruch's position, one of his explanations is that maybe it's like an actual like wooden or whatever like plug that you're putting in, and the issue is that we're worried you might leave it there and it would actually like become a kli, right? That we're worried that you're gonna like leave it there and have sort of constructed something, right? That if you're only actually, if it's definitionally temporary, that's not an issue, but they're saying that like, maybe you'll leave it there and it'll be a problem. And so the implication there is that even if that wasn't your intent, potentially.
Well, explain the word, the last words, the words that he brings from the Tosfot. What is it? How does it prove anything?
That like in the case of the person is basically the distinction they tried to make was that the person is intending to leave the thing there, but is not intending in doing so to make a kli. Because they basically had an issue of, if we're talking about a case where he's not intending to leave it there, then like why in that moment would it be usher, right? And so they say it has to be a case that he's intending to leave it there, but he isn't intending to make it a kli. Otherwise, it's not a psik reisha. If he's intending to
And
make
then
it, it's just.
but then he says it is
Right.
psik reisha.
Right, but they say even though he's not intending to make it a kli, he's just intending to do that and leave it there. That would imply that they think the act, this act of putting that stopper in,
Right.
is a psik reisha, and they would be.
So we have a
potentially-
machloket. So we have a machloket between what the Maggid Mishnah and the Tosfot, whether there's shayachut of, and apparently according to the Rambam and the Tosfot, whether there is shayachut of psik reisha by a kli, and it makes a lot of sense to say that by a kli you don't have psik reisha because exactly because of the case of the kesam, except for this one outlying Gemara. But the case of the kesam sounds like, are you trying to make a kli? Then you made a kli. If you're just breaking wood, you didn't make a kli.
There's another thing besides
Everything can be a kli. Anything can be a kli if I want it to be a kli.
There's another thing besides the kesam that also potentially supports this, which is that, funnily enough, another example that's cited in that Tosfot is this one of somebody who is matin when you have a hadas with a bunch of berries, right? And if you like pluck off enough berries, it becomes a kosher hadas, right? That like some positions say you can't do that on Yontif, right? Because if you pluck off the berries, you are making it a kosher hadas, right? It is mitaken mana, right? But Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon says it's permitted. And the Gemara there is like, what do you mean? Like, that's a psik reisha. He says, oh, it's like he's trying to eat the berries, right? He's not trying to make a kosher hadas. He's just trying to eat. And they say, why should we care? It's a psik reisha that if he plucks off the berries, it'll become a kosher hadas. And the answer was, it's the itbe hashana achriti. That it's permitted when he has another hoshana, when he has another kosher hadas. And
I want to go forward. I don't want to talk about this.
well, no, just because it's the exact issue, right? That there are some people who say, like the Aruch tries to use this as proof that psik reisha delo nichale is permitted. But what a lot of the other people say is that it's not, the way Rashi explains it is just because he already has a hadas, when he eats the berries off of this one, even though it technically has become a kosher hadas, he is not mitaken mana, right? He's not relating to it as a kosher kli. He has not made a kli because he doesn't need one, right? So that actually I think is a perfect example, right? Of he's doing the same act, he's eating the berries, but because he already has a kosher hadas and doesn't need one, then it's like permitted because he's not actually making a kli, right? It's not that
If we were going by, it's a little bit less the content, like his intent. It's not only his intent, it's also like whether this is useful for him. And maybe in the case of the barrel, and maybe we can answer like that. In the case of the barrel, even though it's not his intent, it's useful for him. In the case of the hadas, it's not useful for him because he already has. And in the case of the kesam, so there's lots of twigs around. Nobody needs twigs. It's not useful for him. So it becomes a psik reisha that is a problem when the thing is useful for you. I think that we can say it like that. But when you really don't, it's not useful because you have a lot of them or basically because you have a lot of them already. You don't need those things. You don't need toothpicks. You got to, so then there's no such, then we don't worry about psik reisha. It's only, but if it becomes some psik reisha and it's something that you actually, it's the nichale. It's actually the nichale. It's psik reisha the nichale. Then it's aser. It's interesting. Okay, let's read the last line is actually what we want. Gimel in the Har Tzvi. Go ahead, Lexi.
Sorry, I was on mute. Nishalti imutar liftach b'Shabbat kufsa ktana shel dagim ktanim. So I was asked, can I open this little tin of
sardines?
Yeah, can I open this little tin of fish? Can I open a sardine can? לכאורה לפתוח כדרכו באופן שנשאר כלי, ודאי יש לאסור. אלא אפילו לפותחה באופן שלא תישאר כלי, נמי יש לעיין. So seemingly to open it in a way that it will remain / become a like useful kli, right? You open it and it's now a thing that you could store things in. He says that would be aser. And even if you open it in a way that would sort of be destructive and it wouldn't remain a kli, he says it's still not totally clear.
Could also be usher. In other words, punching a hole in both sides of it and and ripping it apart would also maybe be usher. Rabbi Landis.
Yeah, so his issue was once you have two holes in it from two sides, that's why it's potentially mutter. It's lo michale for anything. It was just lo michale. But I asked my great aunt Esther many years ago, what do they do in the house? They didn't open cans. They didn't open it with two punctures. But b'diavad, if somebody did it, then they use the dugging, and that was it. No one bothered them. He didn't bother them too much.
No, there's b'diavad, but they tried not to do that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I just find this psak at the end, I just find it doesn't fit the whole Chakira we just read, which like gives such a kula, and then he's like so machmir. I don't know if anyone else felt that.
Yeah, so can you explain it? Explain it for us. Why did he machmir after that?
Well, it's like he seemed to say like tikkun kli, it's so subjective. It really depends on kavanah.
Well, he did quote the Tosfos at the end. That was all theoretical. It was theoretical, and at the end he said,
"Oh, I see. Oh, he's passing."
Tosfos was machmir despite that.
Right. I see. So
it was a machloket.
It was a nice chakira, but it was all theoretical. Okay, gotcha.
It was all theoretical. In the end, he said, "Well, it is a kli, and again, people why didn't he hold like Rav Moshe? Rav Moshe he already had said that really it should be mutter. It's just that I'm going to be machmir. It sounds like he's a little more strict than Rav Moshe. He's saying it's actually be ikar hadin asur because it's a kli. It is. You are making a kli whether you wanted to or not. It's because many people do use them as kli.
So actually, I forgot what she added to Esther was, so she understood, is that you opened up the can of sardines from one side and you open it from the other side. But in the meantime, you're holding, it still has a gestalt of a kli. Shouldn't use that word, but anyway, it has a gestalt of a kli because the sardines are still in there. And therefore, at that moment, you made a kli. Anyway.
So you'd have to puncture it so that the sardines fell out of the can or the tin as you did it. Is that the?
No, but that's even that he doesn't really want to allow.
No.
Even that he doesn't want you to open a can at all.
Well, that's layan, but right, yesh layan.
Right, yesh layan means he's not matrim. Yesh layan means he hasn't decided. So if he hasn't decided, don't do it.
To clarify, the sardines a bigger issue because it's like mamish a plate that you use right away. Like it's a kli that you would actually use as a kli right away.
You salvaged 8 sardines out of the can.
Yeah, I think it's. I think
why,
sardines out of the can.
I think it's just
not so machmir necessarily in a case where I'm opening a jar of pickles. Let's say a can.
Oh, that's totally different. A jar of pickles because they're two separate pieces. A jar of pickles is totally different. To say a can of beans, that would be the same. I don't think it has to be sardines.
And then a can of pickles.
A can of pickles would be the same, I think.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if the reason the sardine case is so potent is because it's like a flat open kli that you really use. Like
I don't think so. I don't think so. Not my take on it. Here, let's look at the Pnei Halacha. The truth is, did everybody have the new version that I sent out with more Pnei Halacha? But I actually removed one section and added 3. Kashem shasur. We start like this. Kashem shasur livnot l'stor bebayit bekarko ba'ohel. You can't build, and because he already was talking about that earlier. Kach asur livnot v'l'stor bekli. It's also forbidden in a kli. Lefichach asur litkoa bo yadit patish o amitate betocho. You can't put a broom handle into a broom or or other things, that would be mamash just the same. It would be also deraita. Im itkia kavua, im itkia kavua, if it's permanent, ha'isur min haTorah, ve'im achibur arai, asur medivrei chachamim. Oh, so he says there is a kind of isur d'Rabbanan if it's arai. Arai, it's interesting what he means by arai, temporary or rofef. I think interesting what he means by that. V'ken asur min haTorah larkiv mita o shulchan al yedei masmerim. You can't like build a table on Shabbat. Oh, bragim, devek, hoil v'zeh chibur gamur, because it's a total chibur. V'ken asur larkiv regel ishel kisei. You can't put on the leg of a chair or on a table. Oh, shulchan shenit parka, if it fell off. V'ken asur lahadek gumiya l'raglei kisei or shulchan. You can't put like a rubber end piece at the bottom of the chair. V'ken asur lahasira.
Sorry, I just want to make sure he's not saying you can't add a leaf to extend a table.
No. A leaf for sure you could do.
He'll say that directly in here. He says at some point you can add a leaf. I think it was in here. He said you can add a leaf to a table.
Okay,
actually.
thank God.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to make Shabbat meals more complicated for everyone. Okay.
Lo bilvad, and then he says lo zu bilvad elishekol emat sheyesh chashash. Call anytime that there is a worry, shema yishkach et Shabbat, you'll forget Shabbat v'yavol letaken et hakli, and you might by accident make a kli. Asru chachamim letaltel et hakli. You can't move it. L'mashal safsal shereglo nishmataf. If the leg of a bench fell off, you can't even carry it. You can't use it because we're afraid you're going to maybe build it, unless it fell before Shabbat, in which case you could. I just have to skip a little bit.
Well, I think Rav Nachum, I think if I remember that case correctly, it's actually moving the bench, right? You can't go put the bench onto something else on Shabbat.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's muktzah. You can't move it at all.
Yeah.
You can't move it because you want to rest it on a chair so that now your bench will stand up. You can't move it. But then he goes on in the next paragraph, Mutter lishtamesh b'Shabbat b'kelim shedarko shederek shimushan al yedei havraga. So things that are normally screwed, you could use on Shabbat. Kagon masecha shel sansenet, michseh shel sansenet, the lid of a pickle jar. You twist it on. He gives other examples. He gives like a what's it called? Binocular, but you twist the eyepiece to focus. That you could do. And then he gives a stender where you make it go up or down with screws, you tighten it. And also like maybe a piano bench. Let's skip to Zion. In Zion, he says, actually, let's skip. I want to skip even further. I want to skip to Yud Aleph, the one I sent out. In Yud Aleph, he says, Mutter liftoch b'Shabbat kufsaot shimurim. Oh, he says you can open your cans on Shabbos. Kedei le'echol masha b'tocha. Ho'il v'hen no adu l'shimush chad pami, because they're chad pami. He's basically, that's it, they're chad pami. Ve'en lehem chashivut. They have no chashivut. Shel kli. They're not considered a kli. V'din an kedin klipat egos. They're like a klipat egos. Like the choltot that we learned, like the choltot in the Shulchan Aruch. V'keshem shemuter lishbor et klipat hagos kedei le'ochlo, kach mutar liftoch kufsa shimurim kedei le'echol et masha b'tocho. You can break it just like you can break an eggshell or a nutshell. V'ken lamadnu b'mishnah shover adam et achavit le'echol himenu grogrot. You can eat bilvad shelo yitkaven lasot kli. Take it as it's written. Don't make things complicated. Many explain, he's talking about Tosos, that we're talking about a mustaki. And what does mustaki mean? It has no chashivut. It is batel to the food. It's really just it's just a wrapper for the food. It's not a thing in itself. Kemo klipat egos. Shebatal egos. V'lechen mutar lishbor et achavit kedei le'echol Hateinim shebetocho, because it's a mustaki. So he's going like Tosfos. V'lo hayu shovrim et hachavit ba'ofed shehateinim hitparzu, and they didn't break this barrel from both ends so that the thing should fall on the floor. Ella hayu shovrim et rosha, they would break its top. V'hateinim hayu munachim ba od yamim rabim. They would leave them there many days. Ad sheyisayimu. I just lost the page. Wait a second. Lochlan, to finish them. Aval amru chachamim tanai. Ubilvad shelo yikaven lasot kli. You can't be trying to make a kli. She'im hu oseh la petach yafeh umachin oto leichsun devarim nosafim harei hu mitaken kli upetichata over be'isur. Then it'll be usur to open the can if you're trying to do it for a kli, if you want to use it as a kli. But you can open your pickle jar and leave the pickles there for many days. You don't have to empty it out, because that's what the case of the mustaki is. The mustaki was they didn't empty out all the growth, they left them in. V'ken hadin b'kufsat shimurim. So too is the exact same case of the cans. Shemuter liftoach otan b'Shabbat kedei le'echol et ma shebetochan. If you're trying to eat what's in them, fine. Va'afilu im yavor kama yamim ad sheyisayimu, if it takes some time to finish it, et kol ma shebetocho kevan shemiyad la'achar miken zorkim oto. But since you always throw them away, after you finished eating them, ein la chashivut. That means that the can has no significance. Umuter lipotcha b'Shabbat. Aval mi shemitkaven la'aniach betocho devarim nosafim. But if you're going to use it to carry around nails or your collection of lint balls, asur lo liftoach ota b'Shabbat. You can't then open it. Ki petichata hu oseh la petach u'machshir oto l'shimush. V'yesh shechmiru. Oh, yesh shechmiru. Rav Moshe. Yeah, Ori. You are also machmir?
No, I wanted to say that it's a little like, if it is reading Tosfot, it's reading Tosfot in a more makil way, because I feel like when we first read about Mustaki, we were sort of reading it into it as it is going to fall apart anyways, and therefore there's no way you could be making a kli out of it, or it's sort of not. And because today you have to.
No, I called it chad pami. It's a vessel that's chad pami. I did say rickety,
but I just think that the physical manifestation of chad pami in Tosfos' time and ours is quite different. Like when we open a chad pami thing like this, they're quite sturdy and they really will last.
Right, but it's still
right.
Yeah, he's taking. I appreciate what you're saying.
Moshe would look at it differently, because it's like where.
No, Rav Moshe looks at it exactly like this. Rav Moshe looks at it exactly the same way. If you look at I didn't show you the chula, but
he said maybe machmir. I thought because
he's machmir for other reasons, because maybe people will want the kli or whatever. He's machmir for other reasons.
My point, because if you think about the concrete reality today, I open up a can. It could be a great pencil holder for the rest of my life. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
but you never did that. Nobody does that.
Okay, but you could see why if you're.
You could do a lot of things. You could do a lot of things.
A lot more machmir, because if he's saying that the mustaki, it sounds like it's not going to last.
No. That's not the way to understand it.
We discussed that. I'm not trying to be machmir.
No, I never said that it was about to break. I never said that the barrel was about to break anyway, so that's why you can break it. I just said it was a thing that had already been reconstituted, so you're not going to reconstitute it again. That's the way I understand it.
And you don't think there's a mitzias to that? It's not just it's
glued back together, and it may be strong, but if I'm not going to do again gluing back together, I'm not going to recycle the recycled. I think that's the way I understand.
No, and I'm not disagreeing with that reading being a good way to read it. I'm saying that today, and you can find obviously cases of this, right? Like when we say,
I gotta go. I gotta cut you off because I want to continue. Yeshech miru shelo liftoach kufsaot shimurim b'Shabbat gam kasher kavanah lizarkan. Oh, there are those who said you can't do it. Shehoil b'foil akufsa ra'uya lachson devarim nosafim. Since in actuality you could use it. Ha'oseh la petach hofech ota lekli. And he quotes here the Chazon Ish, which I didn't bring you, but Chazon Ish is on the same side as the Har Tzvi. Ulam lemaisa halacha kedivrei matirin, but the halacha is like the matirin. Hoil umedubar bekufsaot va'arizot shenoadu l'shimush chad pami, ein beptichat ha'isur. And then he has a footnote. Does he have a footnote? Do I want to look at the footnote? No, I don't want to read the footnote. Okay, so yeah, you're right. It's just like eye-opening. He just says, "Oh, I'm just going to put everything into this category of mustaki," and then not everything, but all cans are in a mustaki place, and so therefore they're allowed. Now let's just look a little bit at the English in a couple of minutes. Many dairy products are sold in plastic containers. One may peel the cover off such plastic containers. Similarly, packages of wafers, chocolate bars, etc. Okay, you see, he's just saying one may make a hole in a bag of the top of milk. The next sentence. So you can open a milk bag or juice in order to pour the liquid out. Open the top of the bag of sugar that is glued shut. Rav Moshe clearly says even sugar bags you can't open. And rip open bags of candies and other foods. Similarly, we find that the sages permitted cutting open chotalot. I said it, I switched the letters. Chotalot. That's archaic on Shabbat. They permitted this because the leaves lacked importance, as they were considered entirely secondary to the dates inside, similar to an orange peel. So he's saying the same way you can open the dates, you can do whatever you want. You can open a bag of milk or a carton of milk. Well, he didn't say carton. Some are stringent and do not open bags or packages if the food will remain inside for a while. So he mentions that there are other opinions. They maintain that one who makes a neat opening is not ruining the bag, but rather creating a receptacle. According to this approach, the only way to open such a bag is to tear them apart entirely and transfer their contents to a different container. In practice, the halacha follows the lenient position. You're just saying, no, that's not the halacha. In practice, the halacha follows is saying this is what people do. Because these bags have no importance and are thrown out, the food they contain when the food is finished. Therefore, one may open them in whatever way enables easy removal of their contents. He may use them until the food inside is used up. In other words, you can even make, like I have actually a milk bag holder, and it has a little like sharp knife in it, built in, and you can slice off the end of it's very safe, it's covered and everything, but you can slice off the end of the bag directly in the holder. And makes a very sharp cut. Now, you can cut the end of your bag with a scissors, even though it's a nice spout, because this thing is essentially not a thing. It's just a wrapper. And therefore, we don't care that even if you're trying to make a nice spout. What about bottles, the last 13? He says, what about unscrewing a metal cap? And he basically says that some people allow it, some people don't allow it, and he says the halacha is to allow it. So I really like, and I like the Pnei halacha, because he doesn't just say halachot, he brings both opinions. He also uses the terminology from the Gemara, he brings quotations from the Gemara, he brings detailed footnotes also. He uses the terminology of the Gemara and he explains how he understands it. And even though the book in Israel is given to high school kids or even earlier, who probably don't even read it, they want them to read it and then they don't actually read it. It's actually, in my opinion, a scholarly work. He reduces things to the actual halacha, but that's the same thing the Shulchan Aruch did. The Shulchan Aruch just takes the halacha and gives practical cases for I don't know when the Shulchan Aruch was written. 1490 something or 1523 or something like that. Does he make practical cases for those days? So he's also making practical cases, but he's showing you his approach. His approach is to say, well, we've got all these chumras. How has it actually been interpreted by the people and by the modern poskim? He's a lot based on also Rav Ovadia Yosef, who's going to be more lenient in some of these things. Okay, that's what I got for this fascinating topic. Rabbi Landis. We don't hear you. Can I can't unmute you. You're muted, Rabbi Landis. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody.
Shkoyach.
I'll let you know what we're doing next week. Okay.
Are we just going to the next Siman 3:15 or not necessarily?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so you'll let us know. Sounds good.
This information.
Yes, Kayak,
sooner we
a beautiful
study
share.
it, so
Thank you. What'd you say,
Very
Josie?
nice.
the
Thank you.
sooner we can get the assignment, the more thoroughly we can study it. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Shkoyach.